Okay.
Good evening, UK Crime Book Club. I know that we have already got some excited people eagerly awaiting Simon. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else, Simon Scarrow. So,
Hi,
say
everybody.
hello, show off, tell us about Blackout. Let's go in straight away with your latest.
This one.
This one.
Yep. So, Blackout is my first solo crime effort, actually. I've been writing sort of my more usual thing is kind of straightforward historical fiction, particularly this series, which has gone on for, I'm writing the 20th book now as we speak, actually. So, well, not as we speak, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so Blackout was something that came up as a. Well, I've always wanted to write a book set in Alderney because I've been there for a few literary festivals, and it's a tiny, tiny
Rachel
island.
Abbott from Alderney.
That's right. Yeah, I know Rachel. She's got a lovely little fort at the end of the island where she's living and knocking out her books. So it's a lovely place. And I thought, and I didn't realise until I went there for the first time. It's the only place in Britain that had that was occupied by the Germans that had a concentration camp. So I thought, well, what a grim, amazing setting. And so I decided I was going to write this book, a sort of crime novel, whodunit, set in Alderney. And then I thought, well, the guy that's been sent there has been sent there as a punishment because nobody gets sent to Alderney for kicks. It was kind of where you got posted if you'd done something wrong. So I thought, well, what's he done wrong in Berlin that would get him posted there? So that's when I started researching Berlin, Second World War, and then I thought, well, and I became more and more interested in that, and I had a couple of trips to Berlin to research the setting. And I thought, no,
That's a shame. What an awful place to have to go for some research.
Isn't it?
How taxing that must have been.
Well, it's the first time I've been to Berlin, and I've been a couple of times now. And I have to say, it's my favourite city in Europe, without a shadow of a doubt. It is just so chilled and laid back, and then there's just so much history, and it's quite funny because I wrote a tech thriller a few years ago. One of my ex-students, and he went to Berlin. He said, "Oh, you've been to Berlin?" I went, "Yeah." So I said, "Well, so which museums do you see?" And he kind of gave me this blank look. He said, I was clubbing. So apparently, it's got really good sort of social scene for young people. But
I think I prefer the museums.
Well, the museums are brilliant, and the food's great. People are really nice. There's a lovely chilled atmosphere, and both times I've been, it's about spring, and the weather was fantastic. So, but it's just the strange thing is, you can turn a corner in Berlin and walk down a slightly older street, and for the first sort of 12 feet from the ground up, it's still pockmarked with scars from the Second World War, bullets and shell impacts and stuff. So it's very much a city in progress. There are big sort of areas of it that are being reconstructed, particularly in the east. It's just a fabulous place, and so that gave me the inspiration to think, now I'm not starting this in Alderney. I'm going to start many years earlier, and at the beginning of the war in 1939. And when two things, first you've got the war's been going for a few months, and most people in Germany are convinced it's going to be over in the next few months, because why wouldn't the French and the British sue for peace now that Poland's been wiped off the map? And that was the reason for the war. So they're fairly confident that there's going to be peace. And then, of course, you've got one of the worst winters in living memory, to throw into the mix, plus the blackout itself. And I thought, well, what an incredible setting. So I'd read about the S-Bahn killer, who'd been sort of operating a year later down the line. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing in itself. Why don't I make that kind of thing the first case for my new hero, Horst Schenker?
I have got lots and lots of questions. I've got my own. I've got some that I've already written down in the notebook from people from beforehand. And your cheeky brother, I knew that was Alex. Hey, bro, I'm going to be asking some personal questions. Hi, Alex. Don't worry, I won't read anything out to you that I think he's been a bit cheeky with.
Well, anything Alex says, you must take it with a bucket full of salt.
So we've got Lucy Sampson says, good evening, Sam and Simon. Lucy's one of our gorgeous admins. We adore Lucy. So she has asked, she's one of my very many questions. You're very well known for your historical series, so she's curious to know what has prompted your foray into the world of crime now, and is it a coincidence that Alex has also turned to crime writing? I should add, crime writing. I hope.
Well, Alex has actually been writing crime for some time, because he wrote a brilliant novel, two brilliant novels that I really liked, which were October Skies, and he also did this thing, The Candleman, which was really grim, sort of about Jack the Ripper. It's just great stuff. So I'm a big fan of his crime fiction, but I'm also, I've been I suppose historical fiction and crime have been the two big genres for me.
They go hand in hand, definitely.
Well, they do, and quite often, I always try and inject a bit of mystery and whodunit into my historical work, because I think readers like that. They like having a bit of a puzzle, to resolve, and it's not full on crime novels or anything like that, but an air of mystery, something they don't know, something that somebody's hiding that they need to follow to find out. That sort of thing creates a natural suspense in a story, and it's one of the things that sort of keeps you reading. And even all storytelling is based upon denying the reader information, so that you can lure them in, and then feed them the clues, and then they get to the end, and they're really chuffed if they worked it out. Because they kind of feel like they've scored one over the author, and if they haven't, then it's a pleasant surprise. So I think if you get it or you don't, it's always fun being a reader.
I always hate it when don't get me wrong, I love to figure things out, but then I'd never put it in a review if I figured something out, because I feel bad. But I'm quite I feel really bad, but I'm quite good at picking up really random things. So I'm always really happy when people surprise me.
Well, I'll be honest. There was a time when I gave up reading anything that would have a sort of kind of puzzle element to it, because that's what I do for the day job. I can spot when they're laying down the clues. So I remember reading. I won't name the book or the author, but it's about 5 years ago now. And about 10 pages into it, his father turns up and says something, and I thought, it's the dad. And sure enough, 300 pages later, okay. But that's because, as I said, it is the day job, and you kind of know, and you can spot these things when people start doing them. There are some authors, I think, who are really good at hiding that sort of stuff. I'm a big fan of Lindsay Davis. And I love her Falco novels, and I'm really glad when Falco retired, she kept the family thing moving on with the daughter, and I love those as well, because it's a sort of slightly different perspective. A female investigator in ancient Rome, she's got to play it very differently from the way her dad did. So I think she's a terrific writer.
On a completely different one, I've recently discovered Peter Boone, who writes cozy crime. And he's filled me massively in different ways, and I love it. I love it when I can say to somebody, I did not guess that. How did you do that? And when I look back through, it wasn't obvious, but everything was there. The breadcrumbs were there, and I love that. But at the time, I don't know how it threw me.
Yeah,
I do. I really enjoy that. We have got so many things here. Anna Anwar has said, hi, Sam and Simon. I actually share a book title with Simon.
A book?
So, a book title.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. Amma, let us know which one it is. Hello, Jack Probin. One of our other author members is watching. Laura May says, I had the best ever burger in Berlin.
Yeah, there is one thing I will name and shame. There's I think it's a sort of canteeny restauranty thing on the Unter den Linden called something like the Green Rabbit. And if you ever go to Berlin, avoid it like the plague. it is, it makes Faulty Towers look like a kind of paragon of efficiency and good service. I mean, I've never done anything like it. And when
you're making me really want to actually go.
Well, it would be good to go. If you're going to go, buy a sort of hot drink or a cold drink. Do not order food.
Okay.
And sit in the corner and watch the chaos. I mean, it's incredible.
That is on my list of things to do. When the world opens up, look out, Berlin, here I come. I'll order something cold. If it's going to take that long, I'll order a cold drink and then...
Yeah, but don't order a salad. My wife ordered a salad. And it took over an hour to prepare. And it was a very, very basic salad. And when she complained about it, they said, well, that's just your opinion. She said, what? And yeah, we think we're doing a really good job. That was the whole attitude. I've never seen anything like it.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Stephen Paul says, good evening, Simon and Sam. It's good to see Mr. Scarrow again. Really loved the book.
Oh, good. So what, the Blackout book?
Yeah. I assume so.
Well, I hope
Stephen,
so.
Let us know which one.
Yeah.
Charlotte McFall. Hello, Charlotte. I've not seen Charlotte around for a while. Says, hi, Sam and Mr. Scarrow. We have got so many different people commenting and questions. Caroline Maston is one of the founders of the group, my partner in crime and the other main interviewer. She has got an insane schedule this month. So she should be sitting down, and she is because she's watching us. She says hello. And she had some questions as well. There's loads of questions. Let's just say hello to... Anna says Brothers in Blood, which is at the side of me somewhere down here on my other shelf. And Stephen Ball says, yes, Blackout, but love all his books. So there you go. He's been busy with all of your books.
Yeah, no, I'm really, there's obviously a big following for Macro and Cato, but I'm hoping that, Blackout's, it's doing well. I mean, it got on the Times bestsellers list, so I'm quite pleased with that. Mm-hmm. And there's been some good reviews and some very, very nice peer reviews as well from the other authors. So, and the other thing that's really nice is we've sold it to a German publisher after an auction. So that was very pleasing because that's Coles to Newcastle, isn't it, really? And so I'm very pleased with the way it's going. I'm just nervous now about writing the second book, because the second book is always the one you worry about in any particular series, because if the first book's gone okay, then you think, oh, bloody hell, I've got to, do it again. And if the second one's bad, or, and somehow the standard drops, then, it's pretty gut-wrenching when that sort of thing happens. Luckily, so far, it hasn't. But, there's always going to be that first time, isn't there?
So you still get nervous?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I have it drives my wife nuts. I have a kind of routine with every book, basically, so that it starts really swimmingly. I get the first 20,000 words down quickly, and I'm really enjoying it and getting into it. And then I think, well, I'm not really sure, kind of what happens next or where the book's going, and you kind of feel your way in a bit further. And 50,000 words is always my worst point in a book. I always feel like this is the biggest pile of shit anybody has ever written. And why? What? And so, but then after that, and it happens every time, and it always takes me, quite a lot of time to get to 50,000 words to get to that point. And then suddenly, around 55,000 words, for some apparent reason, I don't know why, I can see exactly how the book is going to end. I can see how I'm going to get there, and it takes me about half the time to write the next 80,000 words that it took me to write the first 50. And that seems to happen with every book, and I have no idea why. I keep telling myself it's going to be different this time, but it never is.
Stop looking at the word counts. There's the trigger.
The word count's really, really important. The word count is, for me, that's kind of, okay, so I've got to do 3,000 words today. If I do 3,000 words, I'm allowed a peanut butter sandwich as my special treat. or something like that, or whatever it may be. So it's a kind of good way to motivate yourself to get to the end. And then sometimes if I'm watching a television series, so for example, when I was watching The Wire, which I think is a phenomenal series.
Got to say, I've not actually seen it yet.
You've got to.
I've got an insane reading list. There is no time for anything other than Tipping Point and Frasier reruns.
Frasier, well, yeah. Watched last year. We watched every episode of Frasier. So we had 2 over dinner, and it took about 5.5 months, I think, to get through it. But when sometimes when I'm writing, so for example, I've gone through Battlestar Galactica, I've gone through The Wire, so 3,000 words, and then I'm allow myself to watch another episode, and then carry on from there. So it's a kind of, it's not that it's a chore, and sometimes you get so deeply involved with what's going on when you're writing. Stephen King has a lovely phrase for it. He says, when you start to see through the page, and when that moment happens and you're completely in there, then the workout just goes out the window, and you're just kind of putting it all down quite furiously. And I've had days where I've written 9,000 words in one day. I mean, that's very, very rare. But and that's from sort of early in the morning to early hours the next day, simply because I've just kind of hit that seeing through the paper moment. And when that happens, it's really quite something, to be that involved, that you're hearing stuff, you're kind of seeing things in that mind's eye, you're smelling things as well. You are so totally in the setting, and so kind of compelled to find out what happens next in the story. Because I don't plan these things out terribly much. I mean, it was slightly different with a crime story, because I knew at the start who the villain was, and you could sort of do certain things. But things happened along the way, and I thought, no, this is. I knew this was happening, but I didn't know it's going to be this exciting.
I'm going to ask you the most random question now. Do you have a favourite Frasier episode?
Yeah, well, no, there are quite a few good ones on there. The one I really like, I think it's called Les Frères Heureux, when they open a restaurant. You know the one?
Yeah. Is that the Happy Brothers? Is that what it translates to?
I think so, yeah. And there's another one that where Frasier is trying to set up his new boss, who's gay, and invites him around.
Tom is called.
Yeah, and it's a fabulous. Painful is the laughter that comes out of that one, I tell you. But no,
I've got a favourite part of one, and it's called Three Valentines, and it's when Frasier lends Nels his apartment for a date, and he's getting ready, and he's ironing his trousers. And is this ringing any bells for you? I don't want to spoil it for anybody else. He's ironing his trousers. He accidentally sets them on fire. Goes to throw something over the fire, and it's the stew that he's cooked, and he's cut his finger sewing his trousers, and he's got an aversion to blood, so he faints. And it's just genius. I've just thought of the other thing that I watch reruns of, and it's the last thing I'll say TV related and stop taking over. It's The Good Life. I absolutely love The Good Life. Well,
I do too. And when I was young, my ideal woman was Felicity Kendall.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and luckily now, not Felicity Kendall, but someone who is so like her, it's uncanny. Completely mad and ditzy, and just the most wonderful person to be with. So it's my dream come true, that one, I tell you. So we're kind of living the good life here, actually, because growing the vegetables out the back in the middle of a village, and we're living the kind of bourgeois recidivist sort of dream world, really.
Sounds absolutely heavenly.
It's fun. It's fun.
I'm completely ignoring our lovely members. I do apologise, monopolising you. Selena Armitage is the member who joined after following you on, I think it was Twitter. Am I right, Selena? Loved Blackout. Have you finished the second one yet? No pressure.
I haven't started the second one yet. I've done a lot of the research for it, and I know what it's going to be about, and I'm not saying anything at this stage. because actually there are two possibilities. So I'm going to have a discussion with my editor about which story comes first, because one of them is sort of semi-topical, and I would like to get that out whilst it's got a certain cachet in terms of living through not the pandemic, but other things that are going on. So yeah, I've got I know exactly what's happening for the next 2 books, and I've got plots for a few more. But the writing of that will have to wait until I finish the next Bremen book, and I'm looking to start that probably in June, and to complete sometime early autumn. The publication. Gosh, when's the publisher going to do it? Oh yeah, it'll be spring next year, hardback. So that's how.
So you were saying in your in the trailer that you made for the group, thank you for doing that, by the way, about writing on your own this time. So how different has that been?
It's it's an interesting thing, this, because the Macro and Cato ones, books are they're very easy. I wouldn't say easy to write, but they're very easy to get into when you're writing it, because it's like going away with old mates. I know them well enough now. Writing Blackout was a bit like writing the Wellington Napoleon books that I did, because there's a mountain of research that you have to do, because it's a relatively recent historical period about which there is a great deal of historical record, and you need to make sure that you get things right. So, but the research is a lot of fun. I mean, it's hard to kind of prize yourself away from books and start writing, because it's so entertaining finding out about the periods and the crime, the organisation of crime fighting and stuff in the Third Reich. It's really interesting stuff. So, sorry, I forgot what my question was.
It was. We started with, have you finished the second one yet?
Yeah, okay. The answer is no. I haven't started it. But once I get going, it'll kind of roll out pretty quickly, because it's just so much fun to write. But I mean, I have co-written stuff in the past. There are some sort of spin-off books from the Roman series I wrote with a guy called Tim Andrews, and I've written this techno thriller with one of my ex-students called Flame of Death, which is a kind of FBI crime novel, which it was really strange. We had a lot of really, really positive reviews from other readers, and then for whatever reason the publisher completely screwed the marketing up, and the thing kind of sank like a stone. And I'm really sad about that, because it was a really good story, and the FBI guy we used for the research said, yeah, it's one of the most accurate kind of descriptions of how the FBI operates that he's read, and he really enjoyed the story. So, but writing with someone is very different from writing alone, and in many ways I actually enjoy it more, because although it's kind of frustrating sending stuff backwards and forwards between you, and editing and re-editing and then changing something, and you thinking, no, I'd like it like this, and then saying, well, no, we can't do it this way for this reason, and go, yeah, okay. So there's a lot of dickering going on. At the same time, it's just wonderful to be sitting down with somebody else who's quite creative, and you say something, and they say, yeah, but what if we do it like that, but then add this bit on, and you go, yeah, that's really cool. And then you say, what if we do this? And so the whole thing kind of becomes this mad, explosive, creative explosion sort of thing. So I was talking with Tim the other day, and we started out with 2-page synopsis of our next book. And within a matter of hours, we've been sending stuff back to each other, and it grown to about 18 pages. So, and it was really, really good stuff. And it's the same thing when I work with Lee on Playing with Death, and with my brother Alex when we wrote a screenplay together. We did this kind of horror movie screenplay, and that was such huge fun working on that. So it swings around about. So there are benefits and there are frustrations, but at the same time, if you're with someone who is genuinely creative and off the wall, you can have some fantastic experiences just planning a book, let alone writing it.
So you've brought up Lee Francis, and How did the relationship, the writing, the working relationship come about? And I wanted to ask you about what your favourite things to teach were as well, because you've obviously had a big impact, because generally students might not follow the teachers and then end up working with them. So that must be quite a nice thing for you as well.
Well, you know, it's only in recent years that I've actually owned up to being a writer when people ask me what I do for a living. Because I always thought of myself as a teacher. And you'll know this, you know, you're a teacher, teaching assistant stuff. You know that how much fun it is, and you know how rewarding it can be.
I work with 5-year-olds. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, it can be frustrating, but you know, when things go right, and you make a difference, and you can see that light bulb coming on their heads, and they get something, and they're really enthusiastic about it. There's nothing like it, and you know, it's great in young kids, but it's equally, you know, I've taught across the range. So I've done primary up to teaching undergraduates, and they're all different in you know in the ways that they approach things. I think the most troublesome lot I think I had were the secondary school kids, because you know, they were lovely up until they get to secondary school, and then there's just something in the water in secondary schools, and they go completely bonkers.
I would never teach in a high school, not in a million years.
Well, you know, I've had my most challenging experiences in high school, and at the same time, some of my most rewarding experiences. That's the crazy thing about teaching. I think it's a kind of, you know, every day is an emotional roller coaster, because you're on a high because a lesson's gone well, and then you have these sort of depths of despair when a lesson goes badly, and you know,
No comments.
And some of the kids misbehaved, and you know, let themselves down, and you just think, you know, I thought you know, we were on a kind of up curve there, and why this? And that's one of the reasons I got out of secondary education, is because it was just so difficult dealing with that, really. Then I went on to a sixth form college, and then an FE college, FE college, and you know, it's completely different. And the kids there were, you know, wanted to be there. Quite a lot of them were lazy. Quite a lot of them weren't, you know, and you know, and I stayed in touch with quite a few of them as well, because they were just such wonderful people to teach. And I was teaching media studies, and you know, a much derided subject, and I've never understood that, because we live in a world where it's saturated with media, and for some reason it's not on the syllabus. I mean, how do you know, you've got advertising, you've got news, you've got computer games, you've got magazines, you know, we just swim in this stuff, and at no point on the national curriculum does it sort of say, right, you need to understand how this stuff works on you, because you know, newspapers manipulate the way you see things. They manipulate the way you view the world. And if you don't give kids, you know, some media literacy, then they're defenseless, essentially, against all of that stuff. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you end up with conservative governments.
Moving swiftly on. I'm just grinning because I'm saying nothing.
Is your employer watching?
Oh, they probably not now. Most people don't know what I do outside of work. A couple of people have found the clubhouse. I want to pull the ladder up on the book club sometimes, but nobody that I work with so far. Judith Graham says, evening to you both. Hello, Judith. Currently reading Blackout and loving it. And Leslie Lloyd says hello as well. Hi, Leslie. Alex says, second album syndrome, bloody terrifying.
I imagine, I haven't thought of it in musical terms, but yeah, maybe it's the same. You know, if
you've suddenly gone very quiet, Alex. Sorry, I'm looking at Alex's name, Simon.
I've gone quiet.
Yes. There you go. You've come back again.
Okay. Well, I'll sit nearer to the microphone. Okay. No, I think you know, I hadn't really thought. I wonder if you get second movie syndrome as well. I suppose if you had some kind of hit film, then you know, you worry about how that's going to turn out. But yeah, I think
Chumbawamba didn't do anything after Tub Thumping, did they?
No.
I've just aged myself. I've just dated myself.
Yeah, well, a bit of a giveaway then. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, how do you kind of top that one as a party piece? Really, it's you know, I know the students were just going berserk over it when it came out. But anyway, second book syndrome, second album syndrome. I imagine it's the same for anybody creative. If you have something that has done reasonably well, the challenge is keeping the standard up. Not an easy thing to do. Certainly, you're going to lose sleep over it. That's for sure.
Selena says she found us via your Facebook page. There you go. I thought it was Twitter, but Facebook. Lucy wants to know, have you ever made any historical bloopers in your books?
Oh, very, very rarely, because I take my research seriously. There is one that I will carry with me to as a shameful burden to my grave, which is I had a Roman officer posted to some far-flung eastern fort, and he was really bored out of his wits, so he spent his time growing plants. So one of the plants I had him growing, of course, was a tomato. And usually I check these things very, very scrupulously, but I think the deadline must have been quite tight that year because I didn't. And of course, tomatoes were discovered in South America. However, I said to my editor, I can't confirm or deny that various kind of Roman seafarers had never reached the sort of southern states. So it's anybody's guess. But that sort of thing, it hurts when you get it wrong. So I tend to put a lot of time into the research to make sure that doesn't happen. And one of my big delights actually is quite often having people writing to tell me I've made a mistake when I haven't. So, case in point would be when I did the Wellington Napoleon books. Somebody said, you've called him after Wesley. Any fool knows that before he was the Duke of Wellington, he was Arthur Wellesley. So, and I said, yes. And any fool can check on Wikipedia and see that the family name was Wesley until it became Wellesley, Arthur's father, and his brother, who inherited the title, didn't want to be confused with those really, really boring hymn composers. So that's why he changed the family name to Wellesley, which was a sort of older version of the name from the past. Now this is easily enough to find out, but it tells you something very, very interesting about history in a kind of popular history context. So there's history as in the things that really happened. There's history that the historians tell us happened. Then there's history that historical fiction tells us happened. And then there's history that television dramas tell us that happened. And then there's the history that people get completely wrong and tell you about. So history is a very, very kind of complicated, multifaceted thing. And this is why you're constantly coming across people that correct other people. In fact, one of the funniest things I think I've ever experienced is when I went to one of the ordinary literary festivals, and they have, because it's history themed. So one of the things they thought they'd do as a bit of fun is to have a sort of history quiz at night. So with all the guys and girls from the historical fiction, historical property historians and stuff all gather, and they start, and the person who's done the question starts asking the question, and there's nearly a riot every question. No, that's not true. That's been scripted. And this just went on, for hours. And the quiz should have taken, it's only about 50 questions, but it took nearly 4 hours to get through because everybody was challenging. So you never ever get a bunch of historians in a room if you can do a history quiz. It's just recipe for chaos. It's they say herding cats. Herding facts is it would be the similar sort of thing.
Brilliant. I do think if you're ever going to challenge somebody, don't say only a fool would, because it's absolutely got to rain down on you, surely.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got Lucy said her husband spotted the tomato blooper and she appreciates your honesty.
Well, I think we caught it for the paperback. But yeah, I mean, when that as I say, out of 35 books I've now written or co-authored and stuff, that's the one that really, makes my sphincter clench, because, I just feel so embarrassed by that.
I just think as bloopers go, a tomato has got nothing on the kind of stuff I do on a daily basis.
You're very kind. I mean, it drives me nuts when I'm reading fiction and it's something I know about, and an author does something, and you think, no. And sometimes it's things like I remember reading a book about Caesar, and it mentions that Sulla was murdered Sulla murders Marius, and then Sulla is murdered in turn. I remember thinking, both those guys died in their sleep, So when you read stuff like that, you just sort of think, why am I so worried about tomatoes?
Yeah. That's the whole level of perfectionism
Well, being Aspergic, that it has its benefits.
Absolutely. And you're probably far more likely to not make mistakes. You're probably far more thorough. So I can understand why that would drive you insane. But yeah, take great comfort from the fact that I do worse things on probably not even a daily, probably an hourly basis. Don't ask my husband for examples.
It's early yet.
Alex wants to know when you're doing the Blood Soldiers project.
Okay. This is the screenplay that Alex and I co-wrote, and we had a lot of fun. Because we when he was starting out, we did quite a few events together, and actually I missed doing events with Al because they're always a lot of fun. And we'd been to.
I can imagine it would be two of you together.
Well, it's odd because when we were watching Frasier, we kind of look at each other and think, those, Frasier and Niles are not so dissimilar to Alex and I.
Are you snobby and competitive, Simon?
Yeah,
a little bit pretentious and very competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not quite so pretentious as the Fraser brothers, but you just find yourself. Well, it's the pratfalls and things like that. We're very good at that, and the social awkwardness. So saying the wrong thing in company, and
Oh, I do that live on camera. I'm doing it now. Stop talking, Samantha. Carry on, Simon.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so yeah. Al and I were on this. We've been to an event, and we're on the train back from Liverpool Street, and somebody jumped in front of the train at I think it was Ipswich. So it came to a juddering halt, and we were stuck there for 4 hours. Whilst policemen sort of went past and came back with bin liners with body parts in and so on. So Al and I, said, well, what we usually do in those sort of situations is pull out the ideas books and go through some ideas. And we got talking, and I said to Al, we were talking about well-dressed villains. I said, well, who are the best-dressed villains in history? And I said, well, obviously vampires, because the dinner suit and all that sort of stuff. But also Nazis, because their uniforms were designed by Hugo Boss. So I thought. So I said, well, why hasn't anybody written about Nazi vampires? And I said, they've got to be the ultimate badasses and brilliantly dressed whilst they're at it. So we came up with this idea for Blood Soldiers about a company of Nazi vampires fighting in the Second World War. And, it was just great fun, just knocking the ideas out and coming up with some bizarre, story for these people to be involved in. And we wrote the screenplay. And we're also pitching it as a kind of series of novels as well. But unfortunately, at the time that we did that, both our agents, this is one of the funny things about publishing, it's so important to get the right agent. And luckily, the agent I've got at the moment is a really, really entertaining, smart guy with who takes no shit at all. And it's lovely to see him kind of apply the thumb screws to publishers and watch them kind of cringe. But we'd had a meeting with some of our previous agents, and they just spent 2 hours telling us why they couldn't do things. And as we came out of the meeting, I said to Al, look, don't we pay them to do stuff for us, not tell us what we can't do? So at some point, it would be lovely if Alex and I can find somebody who would, because it would make a terrific. We wrote this film script. I think it would be a terrific film. I mean, it was funny, it was scary, and it was relatively cheap to make. Nazi vampires. What could be better?
We'll add you to our list. Kaz has got an idea of us petitioning Netflix, so we'll put you on the list. I'm chuckling because Lucy's just said, I can hear you pouring your gin, Sam. Now, I'm not drinking gin, I'm drinking lager, but I thought I was being subtle.
No, well, I heard it too.
Very, very slowly.
Well, I can see you kind of like doing this.
Keeping an eye on it. Oh my word.
Plug.
That's going on the blooper reel, dearie me. Leslie Lloyd didn't realise you and Alex were related.
Well, the name like Scarrow, and there aren't many of us about, it would be a pretty strange if we weren't really. Actually, it's quite funny because my grandfather was doing the family tree some years ago, and Scarrow, but apparently the original ones came over from Holland as dike diggers in the 16th century. And then most of them were exported during the 19th century, 18th and 19th century. Quite a lot went to Australia as sheep stealers. And then a lot of them went to, there's a host of Scarrows in Canada and the United States. And the ones in Canada were the ones descended from the Loyalists who basically didn't want to stick with the United States when it started out, went over the border and settled there. So every year we get this invitation from the Scarrows in Canada, because they did this massive reunion where they had hundreds of them come from all over the country and America. And occasionally, I think my parents have been a couple of times. And they had this mad kind of jamboree for Scarrows. So I'm not quite sure if that's a good thing or a scary thing. Given the kind of shit that can happen.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it does, and there is a kind of very close, attested family tree for all of these people. So we know, it's not some common name that you could be related or not. We're all related. Sounds a bit spooky and almost Mormonish, really, doesn't it? But there we
go. Lucy also wanted to know, which authors do you like to read for pleasure, and do any of them influence your own writing? And Kaz actually asked which historical authors influence you as well.
Well, it's a difficult one because before I started writing, I read voraciously right across the board. And one of my the big influences when I was young was C.S. Forester, because he did series based the Horatio Hornblower series. Beautifully written, and there's one in particular called The Happy Return, which is my kind of, whenever I go, because I reread these things once every 7 or 8 years or so, and I always start with The Happy Return because it's just such a brilliant book, and then I think, I remember how good it is, so I'll start from the beginning and do the whole series again. And he writes beautifully. I mean, not terribly accurately. He's not as accurate as say Patrick O'Brian, but there's just something about he gets people. He understands kind of what attracts readers to certain characters and repels them from others. And then sometimes his scene setting is on a par with Rosemary Sutcliffe. So you kind of you're reading the stuff and you can see it all, hear it, smell it. He's that good. So and as far as crime writers go. Well, I mean, I started out with Conan Doyle because it's just so much fun, doing the whole Sherlock cycle. I was never a big fan of Agatha Christie. I've read quite a few, but everybody's, all the characters seem to be there mainly to serve the plot and have absolutely no kind of three-dimensionality about them at all. Whereas someone like, as I say, Lindsay Davis, Falco's such a brilliant character, and the whole idea of taking a kind of Californian gumshoe and sticking him in ancient Rome was just such a stroke of genius. And she writes it that way. So it's almost like hearing Raymond Chandler channeling his inner Roman. It's wonderful stuff.
Kaz actually mentioned Rosemary Sutcliffe. Eagle of the Ninth was the book that she was mentioning, one of her favourite books. And
it's a fabulous book. I reread it. Now, I read it as a kid, and then I reread it to my children as they were growing up, and I'd forgotten how good it was. And there's, just to give you one example, there's a lovely scene fairly early on in the novel where the Roman officer he's gone out hunting with the local tribesman, and the tribesman's got some horses and a chariot. And this guy says, well, I used to do a little bit of chariot stuff in Rome. And they have this bet about whether he can handle this guy's team or not. And it's on a summer evening. And she describes that kind of, that honeyed light you sometimes get on a summer evening. And there are those tiny little insects floating in and out of shafts of golden, hued light and stuff. So, and it's still, yeah. So that's the scene she describes. And then he gets into the chariot, cracks the reins, the thing goes into motion, and suddenly the whole world's vibrating around him, and he can hear the wind roaring in his ears. And when you're reading it, you are on that chariot, and then it gets to the end and he sort of draws up, and then you're back to the stillness, but he can feel his heart pounding. And as a reader, your heart is pounding as well. And it's writing of the finest quality. It really is.
I love that. That's got to go on my list. Absolutely. Charlotte McFall has asked, have you any advice for a blonde bimbo trying to write a crime novel?
I'm not sure that the demographic is something I'm aware of, but writing is. When people say, "Oh, have you got any tips for writers?" Well, there are only two tips really that you can give. The first one is read a lot, and I mean a lot, and the second one is write a lot, and I mean a lot. And it's not just simply write your novel. It's write anything. So if you've seen something on the news or newspaper article you read that offends you or interests you, write something down. Write your responses down. All writing, refines your skills as a writer. Whatever you're writing, and very often you find yourself kind of transposing those skills. So, I was writing to a friend a few months ago, and I do write letters occasionally because it's a bit of a dying art in the age of social media and emails and so on.
I miss writing letters.
Well, I've probably got one of, certainly Norfolk's largest collection of fountain pens. I'm a bit of a completist as far as fountain pens go. I'm always on the search for the perfect fountain pen. I have one, and ironically, it cost me 49 pence in book sale. But yet it writes better than any other fountain pen I've got. And that was a complete accident. But writing with a good fountain pen is such a wonderful experience. And writing to somebody and describing an experience, or I was writing to a friend about this deer that we'd befriended that used to come into our garden and play with the dog, and then we'd take it for walks and stuff. And it's a red deer. It's not a muntjac or anything. So this thing's proper size, and it was rescued by a lady who breeds horses in the village. And so this deer's called Bam Bam, and I was trying to explain, how peculiar it was to have this deer, approach you willingly, because most of them just turn and run when you see them in the wild. And he, basically moved in, and would come and live with us most of the day. And if the door was open, he'd get in the kitchen and he'd sort of mosey through the bread bin and the fruit bowl, things like this. But he was really, really lovely, and we lost him a couple of weeks back because somebody in the village poisoned him. And so there's a whodunit. But and I've been grieving about it ever since, and I think it's because I'm very, very aware of the fact that this is an experience I'm only ever going to have once in my life.
Yeah.
And to be chosen to be singled out by a deer to approach you and be your buddy kind of thing. It's quite moving.
Yeah.
And I was trying to explain how I felt about it because it's an animal, but at the same time, having lost Bam Bam, I think I've grieved more over that than most people I've known, who've died. So, writing it down with a fountain pen in a letter seemed to be the only way I could actually get that down and get it out there. So, if I would have been perfectly at home, I think, at home 200 years ago when everybody wrote with fountain pens, and well, not fountain pens, but with pens. Obviously WordPress is terribly convenient and easy to get the word count up, but there's no pleasure that from a writing point of view that matches writing a letter. I think longhand with a fountain pen, and I know that makes me sound terribly old-fashioned and nerdy, but I'm very unapologetic about that.
As well, you should be, because I can't remember the last time I handwrote a letter, and I've not handwritten a letter with a fountain pen probably since I was about 15. Which is a little while ago, just a small amount of time ago. But I have got lots and lots of letters. I've kept them all, and you've kept all of yours.
No, I don't. I tend to hang on to them for a while, but when I've moved a few times, and sometimes you go to the filing cabinet and you think, really, why have I got all my essays from university? Why? And it was really interesting to have a clear out when we moved to this house of all my teaching stuff, because I thought realistically now, because I took what I thought was a sabbatical in 2005, and I haven't gone back to teaching since, and I miss it dreadfully. So I kept all my lesson plans and all my schemes of work and all my favourite things that I used to do with the students. But then I thought, be honest. What value is there in hanging on to this? And I got rid of them. Of course, I regret it bitterly. I'm a hoarder.
It's very quiet when we tell people that we can get rid of things. My husband thinks we're not allowed to.
Well, I'm in two minds about it. I'm a terrible hoarder. And
I'm the hoarder, not him. I'll clear that up. It is me. I keep everything I've ever written, notes I've made on things, post-it notes. I'm getting better. My office is looking a bit better than it was, but I don't like to get rid of things.
Yeah, I know, because sometimes you write something down, an impression. If for example, if I'm out walking the dog and I'm sitting down under some trees by the river in the village, and one of my favourite words in the English language is Scythoism. Okay, and you know this one at all? Or okay, so it's
my favourite word's wibble. That tells us where our vocabulary differs.
No, this is one I just read somewhere, and I thought, yeah, no wonder I like that word. So the Scythoism is the sound of the breeze blowing through leaves, that light rustling noise. And I was sitting down by by the river with the dog, and the wind was blowing through these very, very tall trees. And it's just this fabulous sound. It was a sunny day, and you try and write those impressions down. Because sometimes how it is. You have a moment of clarity where you're thinking about something. You think, there, I'll get that down, or it's an impression about something that you sort of the way the light looks at a certain time of day, or in a certain place.
That smell when autumn's coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you can suddenly there's just this. I'm not even going to attempt to put it into words the way that you could, but I can smell it now thinking of it.
Yeah, well, it's that kind of slight damp earthiness, isn't it? Yeah, so if you're walking along a forest path, and there's that ever so slightly dampness and that kind of rich earthy odor that sort of goes with it. Yeah, it's the same thing with when you cut the grass. One of my favourite smells is cut grass. It just reminds me so much of summer and happy days, really. And bonfires in autumn. You know, when I can still remember a lot of my memories of my father are him coming in from the garden, smelling of leaf smoke, with a ruddy kind of complexion and a happy smile.
Somebody I work with actually said something about men and fire, and I was like, no, I'm the one that lights the fire pit at my house. I love that thing of being outdoors and everything's going on around you. All the birds are jumping around and everything's still, but you can hear distant traffic and people, you know, going about their own business in the gardens and just sitting. And then slowly everything calms down and everything becomes still, and all that's left is you and the fire pit. I just love that.
Yeah. Well, I had a lovely bonfire last week, and I listed about this time of day. It was a really lovely evening, and loads of cuttings and trimmings and things like that. And it was going really nicely. And I just sort of pulled up a chair, a tin of pear cider with me, and just, as you say, just sat down. And we are miles from anywhere. There's no sound here, apart from birds and stuff, and the crackle of the flames. And I was just sitting there thinking, yep. So
this moment, this is nice.
Yeah, well, Kurt Vonnegut, I remember him saying something about his uncle, and because they used to go, sort of jaunts out of New York and go into the Central Park, or they go out for the city for a while, and they'd have these fabulous kind of family picnics. And every so often, he said his uncle would sort of sit back and go, "Life doesn't get much better than this, does it?" And he said, "Yeah, there are plenty of those moments." And I think, particularly now, you cherish those. Sitting in the garden the other day with my wife, and wonderful, calm, serene moments where you're not thinking about the next thing you have to do. You've got to cherish those. You really have.
And what a perfect way to end an hour-long interview. That has absolutely flown by. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to anybody who we've got so many people watching that we've not said hello to, but sorry everyone, hello. And shall we give everyone a final recap of Blackout so they can go and buy it in their droves?
Okay, well, there you go. This is the new book, set in Nazi Germany in 1939, winter of 39-40. Serial killer on the loose. Police inspectors called in to nobody knows it's a serial killer at the start, and he kind of puts it together that there are quite a few deaths that have occurred on Berlin's railways that are actually connected. And the problem for the Nazi hierarchy is they fear that it might have something to do with them. So he's got to kind of steer this narrow line between being a professional police officer and being very, very wary that he doesn't sort of upset too many Nazis along the way. It's a pretty difficult job, I think, being a
fine balance, yeah.
A policeman in a criminal under a criminal government. Although we're finding maybe that's something that's quite contemporary.
Somebody did actually make a comment, but I'd lost it by the time I came to it. But we'll leave it on our lovely thoughts of bonfires and autumn and leaves and ruddy faces. What a lovely place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for asking me. Okay.